The first sound was metal on metal clang. Clang, clang. It was 6 a.m. on a Tuesday in late September, and someone was attacking the back gate of my property. I set my coffee like on the nightstand, pulled on my robe, and walked to the back porch. From the deck, I could see her clearly. A woman in a maple crest HOA polo and yoga pants, gripping a pair of bolt cutters in both hands, working the lock on my new steel gate. Like she was trying to cut a snake in half. She saw me, she did not stop. "Open this gate," she said it like a manager talking to a stalker. No good morning, no question and order on my land. In my robe before I'd even had my second sip of the day. "This is our shortcut," she shouted, jabbing one finger at the dirt trail behind the gate. "It has always been our shortcut. Open it or I'm calling 911 and the HOA. And you are going to lose this house. Do you understand me?" Her name was Janine Whitmore. She lived for houses inside Maplecrest, the subdivision that bordered my parcel on the north side. I knew her name because I had typed it 6 months earlier into a court filing she had never bothered to read. I didn't say anything yet. I just watched she switched modes the way these people do, from rage to performance. The second she realized I was filming her on my phone. "Sir, I am the president of the Maplecrest Homeowners Association," she said, suddenly clear and slow. "The way you talk to a jury. You are obstructing community access to a recognized shortcut. And I am formally documenting this incident for the violation report." She raised her own phone and panned it across my gate slowly, for angles like a claims adjuster. "What is your name, sir?" I didn't answer, sir. "I asked for your name." I sipped my coffee. She took that as aggression. She took everything as aggression. "I see how it is. Squatter on HOA protected land won't identify himself, refuses access. You are going to find out very quickly that this neighborhood does not tolerate people like you." Squatter on a property whose deed was sitting in a manila envelope on the kitchen table. 15 feet behind me, a deed that had been recorded for 8 months, with my name on the front page and a county stamp on the back. I let her run 3 things, she said, holding up 3 fingers like a teacher. "1, that gate is gone by Friday, or you are looking at $250 a day in HOA fines escalating. 2, I am calling the sheriff this week to report obstruction of a community easement. 3, when I am done with you, you will not be able to sell this house in this county. Do you understand me, sir?" She didn't wait for an answer. She bent down, dropped the bolt cutters on the dirt clean, deliberate like she was leaving a calling card, and walked back to her white SUV with the kind of stride people use when they think they've just won something. The SUV door slammed, the engine started. The taillights cut a small red arc against the trees, and she was gone. I stood on the porch for a long minute. The gate was untouched. The bolt cutters had not even scratched the lock. She had been swinging them like a drama instructor, not a locksmith. The Ring camera above the gate post had caught every second of it, including the part where she identified herself by name and title, a lien, and announced on tape that she planned to use the sheriff to coerce me off. A recorded easement that did not legally exist. I walked down to the gate in my slippers. I picked up the bolt cutters. They were heavy and cheap and almost new. I carried them back up the porch steps and set them next to the manila envelope on the kitchen table. Inside that envelope, the recorded deed for my 4-acre parcel, the county stamped 1998 plat of Maplecrest, a quiet title judgment granted by default in March, naming Janine Whitmore in her capacity as Maplecrest HOA president, with a green return of service card stapled to the back, showing her signature in blue ballpoint pen. I made another coffee. I thought about Ruth, the woman who had owned this land before me. I thought about the promise I had made her the day I signed the closing paper, when she held my hand with both of hers and asked me, almost whispering, "Please don't let her win this time." I thought about how Janine Whitmore had just stood on my porch in her HOA polo screaming about a shortcut that had always been hers. She didn't know. I already settled that question in writing with the county 3 weeks before she ever saw the gate. She didn't know she had signed the receipt for it herself. After her SUV disappeared down the county road, I sat at the kitchen table for a while and watched the steam come off my second coffee. I am 61 years old. I retired 3 years ago after 30 years of land surveying in this county. The kind of job most people don't think about until they need a fence line settled or a property dispute closed. I have walked more property lines than I can count. I have signed my name in the corner of more recorded plats than I can remember. And after 30 years, I have learned one thing about land that almost nobody outside the profession understands. The dirt does not care what people think they own. It only knows what is written down. Janine Whitmore had no idea she was screaming at the wrong man. I bought this parcel 8 months ago from a woman named Ruth Calloway. She was 78 years old, a widow, and tired in a way that had nothing to do with her age. The first time I walked the property with her, she barely made it to the back before she had to sit down on a stump and rest. She apologized. I told her to take her time. We sat on that stump for almost an hour. That is when she told me about the shortcut. The way Ruth told it, it had started innocently enough. 12 or 13 years back, a neighbor in Maplecrest had asked politely if her son could cut across Ruth's land to get to the school bus stop on the county road. It saved him about 5 minutes. Ruth said yes, he was a nice kid. Then his friends started cutting through, and their parents, then strangers from 3 streets deeper in the subdivision, then the joggers, then the dog walkers, then the SUVs. By the time Ruth realized her quiet trail had become a shortcut for the entire north end of Maplecrest, she had been letting people cross for years. She tried to push back. She put up a small wooden sign. Someone tore it down within a week. She called the HOA, even though she did not live in their subdivision and had never paid them $1, and asked them to ask their residents politely to stop driving across her land. That was when Janine Whitmore came to her front door with a clipboard. Ruth told me Janine stood on her porch and explained in that calm, executive voice these people use that the shortcut was a historic community access, that it had been used for decades, and that any attempt to close would be a violation of established community rights. Janine handed Ruth a printed notice. The notice fined her an outsider for $100 for obstructing community access because of the little wooden sign. Ruth paid it. Ruth was 72 and alone and didn't know any better. That was the first fine. There were 8 more over the next 4 years. By the time I met Ruth, the file in her kitchen drawer was 3 inches thick. None of those fines were legal. The HOA had no authority over her parcel. Not one of them was issued under any document Janine had a right to enforce. Ruth had simply paid the way scared old people pay. Because the alternative will put a lien on your house, will take you to court, you'll lose. Everything was too frightening to test. The day Ruth signed the deed over to me, she held my hand with both of hers. She didn't ask for a higher price. She didn't ask for anything except one thing: please don't let her win this time. I told her she had my word. The first thing I did as a surveyor was something most people don't think to do. I pulled the original recorded plat for Maplecrest. I knew exactly where to find it because I had personally surveyed Maplecrest in 1998 as a junior on a 3-man crew, and my supervisor's signature was in the corner. Mine was on 3 of the field note pages. I read the document the way only a surveyor reads it, slowly. Every line, every call out, every meets and bounds description. There was no easement across Ruth's parcel known. Not platted, not recorded, not referenced. The shortcut the HOA had been bullying her over for 13 years was, on paper, exactly what it looked like on the ground: a footpath through someone else's woods. Here is the part most homeowners do not know. In plain English, an easement is a written, recorded right to cross someone else's land. It has to be on paper, filed with the county. Attached to the deed, there is one exception, something lawyers call a prescriptive easement, where decades of open, continuous, unauthorized use can sometimes ripen into a legal right. But that exception has a kill switch built into it. If the original owner ever gave permission, even verbally, even once the prescriptive clock breaks, the use is no longer hostile. It is permissive, and permissive use never becomes a legal right. No matter how many years go by, Ruth had given the first boy permission out loud to his mother in her own front yard. Janine Whitmore's entire empire was built on a sentence. Ruth had said in 2011 to be neighborly. I almost laughed when I figured it out, but I didn't laugh because the law is one thing, and an HOA president with a bullhorn is another. I knew Janine, I knew her type. She would not be argued out of her shortcut. She would not be reasoned with. She would have to be removed on paper by a judge in a way that could not be appealed or ignored or shouted over. So 6 months ago, I filed a quiet title action. A quiet title is exactly what it sounds like. You ask a court to quiet to settle, finally and forever, any disputed claim against your land. You name every party who might claim a right. You serve them, you give them their 30 days to respond. If they don't, the judge enters default, and any phantom claim they had is erased from the record. I named Maplecrest HOA. I named its officers. I named Janine Whitmore in her capacity as president personally. The sheriff's deputy who served her told me later that she signed for the certified envelope at her own front door at to 14 inches. The afternoon on a Wednesday, and tossed it onto her foyer table without the green return of service card came back with her signature on it. In blue ballpoint pen, I have the card. She had 30 days to respond. She probably never opened the envelope on the 31st day. The judge entered default judgment in my favor. The order is 2 pages long. It says in the kind of plain language judges sometimes use when they are tired of foolishness that no easement of any kind, recorded or prescriptive, exists across the subject and parcel, that any attempt by the named parties to assert such a claim shall be considered a clouding of title. I had the judgment recorded. I waited 2 weeks because I am patient. I pulled a county permit for a residential security gate. I hired a contractor I have known for 15 years. We installed the gate in broad daylight on a Tuesday afternoon, with the permit taped to the gate post so anyone who walked by could read it. Not one neighbor said a word. Not one Maplecrest resident knocked on my door to ask what was happening to their shortcut. They drove past it, they saw it. They did nothing for 3 weeks. The gate stood quiet, closed, legal. And then on a Tuesday morning at 6:42 a.m., the woman whose signature was sitting in my kitchen drawer attacked it with bolt cutters. I sat at the table and looked at the envelope. She didn't know it yet, but every threat she had screamed at me from my own dirt that morning. The lien, the sheriff, the lawsuit that you will not be able to sell this house. Every single one of them had already been answered 6 months ago by a judge. She had been served by and ignored. She had been screaming at a fight she had already lost. And she didn't even remember signing for the envelope. 2 days later, on a Thursday afternoon, I was on the back porch sealing a section of the gate when I heard a car door slam in my driveway. 2 doors actually, one sharp, one hesitant. I came around the side of the house and saw Janine Whitmore walking up my front path with a man I did not recognize. Late 40s khakis, polo shirt 1 size too tight, a folder in his hand, and a look on his face like he had not slept well. Janine was already 3 steps ahead of him. She always was. She didn't knock. She rang the doorbell 3 times in a row, the way people do when they want you to know they are angry. Before you even open the door, I came up the porch steps behind her instead. "Can I help you?" she turned. And for half a second, I saw that flicker of recalibration on her face. When she realized she didn't have the high ground of a doorway, she covered it fast. "Mr. Calloway," she said, reading from a printed page, "as president of the Maplecrest Homeowners Association, I am hereby serving you with formal notice of violation. My last name isn't Calloway." Paused the man behind her. Brent, I would learn his name later, winced. Then perhaps Janine said, recovering, "You can clarify it for the record." "I'd rather not," she moved on. Because the only direction Janine Whitmore knew how to move. She unfolded the printed page and read it aloud. In the cadence of a woman reading a courtroom verdict, notice of violation, unauthorized obstruction of community access. The Maplecrest Homeowners Association, acting under the authority of its Declaration of Covenants, Conditions and Restrictions, hereby cites the owner of the property at 4218 County Road 14 for the unauthorized installation of obstructing established community access. Fines shall accrue at the rate of $250 per day beginning Monday. Failure to cure within 30 days shall result in the filing of a lien against the subject in accordance with state law. She held the paper out to me. "I didn't take it. Which page of your CCNRs lists my parcel?" She blinked. "Excuse me. Your Declaration of Covenants. Which page lists my parcel? What's the lot and block? When was it annexed?" The silence on my front porch was the kind of silence that has a pulse. "It's the spirit of the document. Sir, that's not a page number." Brent behind her had stopped looking at me and was now looking at the porch railing. His jaw was tight. He had, I would later learn, spent 20 minutes that morning trying to find my parcel number in the HOAS, and he had not found it because it was not there. And he had not been brave enough to say so to Janine. "Mr. Sir," Janine said, switching tactics, "I am not going to debate the technicalities of homeowner law. On a porch, the notice is served. You have until Monday. Leave it on the table." "Excuse me, the notice." Leave it on the table, I'll respond in writing. She looked at the small side table by my front door, the one with the wicker coaster and the citronella candle, and for a second, I thought she might refuse just to maintain the theater. But Janine Whitmore had spent 13 years winning by performance, and her refusal would have been a break in character. She set the notice down. She set it down to carefully in the center of the coaster, like she was placing evidence. "You are making a serious mistake," she said, noted. "I will be calling the sheriff this week. I want you to understand that the community has rights, sir, and you do not get to override them. Because you bought a piece of dirt and decided you were a king." I didn't answer. She turned, and she made it 3 steps before she turned back. This is the part of these confrontations I have learned to wait for. Where the bully needs one more line. Because if they don't get one more line, the silence will follow them all the way back to their car. "You have 7 days, she said, or we put a lien on this property. Do you understand me?" I looked at her for a long moment. "I understand you perfectly." She held my eyes for another second, decided she had won that exchange, and walked back to the SUV. Brent followed a half step behind, the way a man follows when he is not sure he agrees with the woman he came with, but does not yet have the words for it. When the SUV was gone, I sat down on the top porch step and pulled out my phone. The Ring camera on the porch had recorded everything, of course including her name, her title, her recitation of the violation, the fine schedule, and the lien threat, all in her own voice on her own initiative. With a witness present, I texted my old colleague Marcus. He had been my partner on 3 jobs in Maplecrest in the late 90s. "Marcus pulling the original Maplecrest plat tonight. Want to double check 1998 recordation. You free Saturday for coffee?" 3 minutes later, already on my desk. "Brother, what did Janine do now?" I smiled at that already on my desk. Word travels fast among old surveyors. I got up, walked over to the side table, and picked up Janine Whitmore's notice. I read it slowly. I read it twice. It had no parcel number. It had no statute citation. It had no record of any board vote authorizing it. It was 3 short paragraphs of confidence, threats on official-looking letterhead, signed by Janine Whitmore as president and Brent Halloran as vice president. It was in legal terms a piece of paper that meant in nothing. Real-world terms, the kind of paper that could and had ruined people who didn't know better. It had ruined Ruth 8 times over for years. The thing about a fraudulent notice of lien, in plain English, is that it is its own crime. You cannot threaten to encumber someone's property without legal authority to do so. Doing it deliberately is called slander of title, and it carries real damages. Janine Whitmore had just hand-delivered me an exhibit. I went inside, put the notice in a clear sleeve, and slid it into the back of the manila envelope on the kitchen table behind the plat, behind the green card with her signature on it. The folder was getting heavier. I made dinner. I did the dishes. I sat on the back porch as the sun went down. Behind the gate, you cannot put a